Hey everybody, I'm Sean Robinson.
I'm Brandon Graham.
And I'm James Harvey.
James, I got to introduce you, man.
Yeah.
We are the line, and we are trying out some new things today. Trying out a few things. First off, first time we've ever talked to the great James Harvey on camera. James is an illustrator, a cartoonist, and I think it's safe to say, can we just go ahead and tell the people, James? He's going to have a book coming out from Living the Line
Yeah,
at some point in 2025.
that's correct.
So that still sounds true to me. I haven't gotten used to that you yet. It's a little intimidating. I get kind of like jetpacks, like you know, robot maid servant vibes from it still.
Sorry,
Sure.
from what? Sorry.
The year
2025.
2025.
Oh, right,
There's
yeah.
more.
Yeah, it's insane. It's yeah, the space year 2025. It really isn't. Yeah, although of course, like that's just because we're very old, you see, and like anyone who's kind of born after the year 2000 is just, well, this is the year it is. But like, yeah,
Well,
every science fiction we grew up with was like, it'd be set in 2006, and it was like, wow, that's really far. That's even further away from 2001, which is really far away. And now it's like
yeah, I mean,
that's the distant, distant past.
I was rather disappointed when I graduated from high school. The year Khan was supposed to have killed everyone on Earth, and started a giant war, etc. And I didn't see shit happen, man. But we are old, and you and I have some commonality in terms of the old man things that we're interested in.
We do.
And I remember when we were first talking, one of the things that really, really got me excited was our joint old man interest in things that were not made,
Yeah,
or
I'm
things that were almost made.
I'm
And
something of an expert on this topic. Yeah, and yeah, having produced a few of those myself, and I guess we're going to talk about another thing that was almost made or was in. But yeah, we were talking about Alan Moore's Big Numbers project. That was a point of fascination for us because we're trying to. Should we tell them about how we're trying to line up that interview? Like,
let's hold off on that because we might
okay,
end up going with that. We're definitely going to come. James is going to come back and talk big numbers with us at some point,
yeah,
and we're going to talk about a few other, I think, uncompleted, incomplete projects as well. But the commonality, Carson and I felt very strongly about Strange Death of Alex Raymond being able to present this in a state that could be read, and sort of like the all of the different things that go into an unfinished project and reasons that a finished project doesn't actually get to be finished. But James, you actually got to do the heavy lifting on, I would say, one of the great unfinished projects of the 20th century. Will you
yeah.
tell us a little bit the genesis of Lifehouse? Brandon, do you know about Lifehouse at all from a starting
A
point?
little bit, yeah. James will tell a better version than my half cobbled together version, but yeah. So it's a. Is this the one that's the project with the band The Who?
Yes, indeed. Yeah.
Yeah. Was this
So
done in connection with Heavy Metal Magazine initially?
Yeah. I guess I'll tell you like but essentially Pete Townsend like of the Who is like he's an interesting character. He's kind of I got this phone call from the publisher of heavy metal at the time, and he was telling me like yeah, Pete Townsend is this master storyteller, visionary, and he in the 1970s, while he was like famous as just like a rock musician, like this is 1971, so like I guess like had Dark Side of the Moon had come out by then. Is that right? So like people were kind of the possibilities of what rock and roll as a medium was capable of were just kind of, they didn't know where the limit was, and they knew like it wasn't just going to be music, it was going to be movies, and Pete had this idea that rock and roll would be capable of inducing a transcendental experience within the listeners, like that perhaps it was
Sure.
going to be the key to some kind of some new route to like higher consciousness. It wasn't just going to be like a youth movement or a kind of a fashion and a music, but just like something that could completely change society, or at least that's what it looked like at the beginning. That's kind of what it looked like from his vantage point in 1971, right? So he wrote this over the course of a weekend, just like in his motorhome. He writes this science fiction script called The Lifehouse, right? And I think, yeah, he writes it in just 2 days straight. And it's essentially, within this story, he kind of writes about virtual reality, and he writes about the synthesizer technology and how synthesizers will be used to let's see how it's such a broadly encompassing idea, and he had such problems like explaining it to everybody because it was also kind of far out, especially in 1971. But essentially, he believed, and it's unclear what's very unclear with Pete is what he actually believed was possible and what was a good science fiction idea that he had for a story. But he essentially
very Philip K. Dick.
Yeah, exactly, and so like I'll be telling. So what I'll tell you right now is it's the plot of the story, but it's also kind of what Pete believed at the time. He believed that you'd be able to like use synthesizer technology to find the lifeline of a human being and encode their lifeline, whatever that should mean, into a musical phrase, which would be looped. And the idea is, if you're able to take the musical lifeline of maybe 100 people or 1,000 people and play them all together, what you'll end up with is the universal chord, this universal note that brings all the people together as one. And in the story of the Lifehouse, this happens, and it indeed creates like this. It induces this new transcendental state that makes all these people kind of essentially become one with the universe, see God, and go to a higher plane, which is, a fascinating little prog rock science fiction story. Now, the problem is when Pete was telling this to people, he was saying, oh yeah, and we're going to do this, and this is going to actually happen when we do these gigs together. And I'm figuring out right now how we encode a human lifeline into and people were saying like, well, Pete Townsend is obviously insane. Like this is something that he kept like bumping up against. Like people were saying, well, Pete, you're mad, and I think he will say like he may well have been. It's not clear. But thankfully my job was not to make Pete's not to make this lifeline thing happen. My job was not as a musician or a technician or a guy who's going to organize these gigs, which is my job was simply as a storyteller, so I could engage with the work purely on that level. Now that was the problem that people had when they're trying to make this as a movie, right? Brandon, I see you yawning. I saw that yawn.
I wouldn't take it personally. I just woke up. But
yeah. Okay.
Well, let's contextualize this just a teeny bit. So
yeah.
It fits in very well with many of the projects that were happening basically from 1967 through early 70s, where I think things really started to sour. You had sort of the Beatles and the Beach Boys racing to make a longer form type of music where the interconnectedness would add into some other type of experience. You had people like Brian Wilson writing not just individual themes, but composing, through composed, non-repeating, units that would be, pocket symphonies that could be, strung together like beads and turn into this big, necklace of humanity, and it's going to be 3 albums long, and it's going to encompass everything from life to death, and then people are going to laugh at the end. You know what I mean?
The Smile Project. You're talking about the Smile Project,
right.
Yeah,
exactly. Specifically, Smile, and similar to Smile, the result of having such a large grasp, but not being able to synthesize each of those things for various reasons, it ends up Who's Next comes out and uses most of those songs. I forgot the name of the following 2 albums. Ended up using portions of the thing. Because it's very difficult to put together something that has such a obviously like all-encompassing scope to it. But you get the idea why they might have thought that. Townsend talked about at the time about how in interviews that when they had gigs, it was like people were almost levitating when they were watching them. And you think about the amounts of drugs and the amounts of sound the actual sound volume that
Yeah.
were involved, and you really can like visually hallucinate purely from exposing yourself to essentially guitars the volume of a jet engine.
Yeah.
Right. And there's something really fascinating about this project of taking the idea of changing the world, I guess, through not just the culture of rock and roll, but essentially auditory. And then James, your job is you have access to nothing auditory.
Yeah.
Tell this story.
That's it. I have to tell it in a purely silent medium. So we're going to get into that, like how I chose to represent sound within this within this project. Like so should we jump into it? Like, shall I show you the first thing in a show and tell?
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm going to make this big, and can you see this?
We've got the script, yeah.
Yeah. Now this is the first page of the script that Pete wrote, and like I could show you this whole thing. I would get sued into oblivion. Like this is
Don't do it.
Yeah, don't do it. I'm not gonna. So I shouldn't really be showing you even that much. But that's the very first page of the whole thing, and which Pete wrote in 2 days, right? And let's see what can I show you next. So I have a.
Is that a transcription of it or an actual scan of the original typewritten document?
It's a scan of the original typewritten document. Yeah. So if I go desktop.
Very 1971.
Yeah, and so that was what I got given. That was the first thing I had to do was read this script from 1970. I read the script from 1971, right? And I read it, and I kind of thought like, well, this could be the best concert movie of all time. I could see like how the pieces were in place to kind of create I don't know, just like a sprawling, slightly insane concert movie. And now what I'm doing now is now this is something that I had to write. So I had to write a summary of every single draft I got given. I was invited to Eel Pie Records, right, which is Pete's company in London, and so they kind of said, okay, you can like sit here with a bunch of the scripts and a photocopier and just like photocopy the relevant things. And what they gave me was 50 years worth of scripts that Pete had written, because he never let go of this idea. Like if the idea failed, he couldn't explain it to anybody, and then I can show you the history of it. So in 1971 he tries to write it, and it's a cool story. It's basically, to me, it feels like the Wizard of Oz, right? It feels like there's this girl called Mary, and Mary wants to get to a place called the Lifehouse, and at the Lifehouse is a man called Bobby, and Bobby is this musical genius who is going to create this transcendental happening that saves mankind, essentially. But it's like you can tell that this person has no kind of awareness of screenplay like structure or anything like that. It's just kind of, it's all over the place. It's kind of and there's like cameos in there for like, let's see, I think Viv Stanchel from the Bonzo Dog Doodah Band has a cameo. There's just like all this, like he's just putting all his mates in it, and there's just all this like sub Spike Milligan kind of nonsense, and just some very kind of 1970s things like I guess I'll get to it later, but like just stuff that would not fly in like 1972, but like just like stuff that became very dated immediately, and so in 1975, I guess Roger Daltrey kind of comes around on the idea, and I think at this point he's already done the Tommy movie. So he's like, well, maybe this would be cool. Like maybe I could be the main character, and we could kind of rewrite this to kind of center me as a. So we get this new version of it where the main character is now called Spin Watchman, right? No longer Mary, but so Spin Watchman replaces the Bobby character, and Spin Watchman goes out into the countryside and joins with a bunch of musical rebels who've been existing outside of the Matrix, like and they kind of create the Lifehouse thing there.
Is it a completely different story at this point?
It's basically a completely different story. You've got characters who've got the same names, but it's like it's a weird inversion of the old story, because the first story, it has a kind of Wizard of Oz structure where Mary kind of breaks free from the Matrix, breaks free from her humdrum life plugged into the grid which is kind of what their equivalent of like a Matrix, like virtual reality network. Mary breaks free and goes to find Bobby at the Lifehouse. Now, we've lost that in the 75 draft. In the 75 draft, Bobby, there's no Mary anymore. It's just Bobby going off to form the Lifehouse on his own, except, of course, now he has the ludicrous name of Spin Watchman. And so we've kind of lost what made the story good. We've lost kind of, it no longer feels like this iconic, everything that it had that made it so memorable is sort of fallen by the wayside. But we do have, the storytelling is a lot more sophisticated and dense, and it's far more kind of worked out and structured. And the main characters of Jumbo and Brick, who are like these villains, are far more well drawn in this draft. And Jumbo has become like a female character now. So now in 1980, a director gets attached, and this director is Nicholas Roeg. Okay. Yeah.
Are you serious?
Yes. Nicholas Roeg. So he's famous for Don't Look Now is his big movie. What else is Man Who Fell to Earth?
Man Who Fell to Earth.
Oh.
Yeah.
With Bowie.
Great science fiction adaptation of the mid 70s.
It was the Tommy director and then the Man Who Fell to Earth director. So they're just like, it's like all these. It is very much a what if scenario of the best 70s 80s rock movie directors.
Yeah, so Nicholas Roeg, his film Don't Look Now is very, it's structured in such a way that doesn't kind of make sense to a lot of contemporary audiences. It's tantalizing, I suppose is the word. Like, it'll kind of show you a character who wants something. He wants to find his daughter, and he's kind of lives this isolated, you see his kind of like isolated, lonely adventures in Venice as he looks for his long lost daughter, and she's always just slightly out of reach. And so Nicholas Roeg's version of the script, he basically makes it into a Nicholas Roeg film. These people are looking for the Lifehouse, and the Lifehouse is always slightly out of reach, and it no longer feels like Pete's story. It's just like, but it'll have.
You're comparing it to the sequel of 2001 and the thing there.
Yeah, it's that is exactly what it's like. It's a bit like 2010, the year we made contact. It feels like a sequel to a movie that never got made, is essentially what we've got here. Okay. Then we get a redraft of Nicholas Roeg's story, which has a kind of tacked on feel-good ending. Finally, we get the 1999 radio play, which is the only version of the Lifehouse that ever got properly released until we kind of resurrected the project. So now... Sure. Mary is now the daughter of Ray and Sally. Ray and Sally, by the way, are these two characters who are always, they're referred to in the lyrics of these songs. Like Baba O'Reilly has, Sally, take my hand and we'll go across this land. But in the story, Ray and Sally are never quite central. Like, so at redrafting this story to put Ray and Sally in and give them a kind of centralized role was actually kind of a challenge, because their adventures never quite dovetailed with Mary's adventures. But in this 1999 radio play, Mary is now the teen daughter of Ray and Sally. And Ray is kind of a stand-in for the now aged Pete Townsend, who's way past middle-aged at this point. And it's a very odd...
I see mention of a hacker rapper. So it sounds very 1999.
Yeah.
Imagine there's some snowboarding.
Yeah, so Bobby is now called the Hacker, which is kind of, and I guess like the Matrix was out at this point. So, but I found a draft within this like vast box of scripts that they eventually sent me. I found a draft where the Hacker was called the Rapper, and I guess someone told, "Hey Pete, we can make this more relevant if it's about rap music." And So there is I've said this. There's I had audio of Pete Townsend rapping, which is on disc 3 of the Lifehouse Chronicles. They also sent me like about 7 CDs worth of music that was recorded for this project. So
does that include the audience sessions that they held at different times in the 70s?
No, and I really wanted to see that. Like Pete told me that there was like paintings produced for that, and he was like, "Oh yeah, you'd really like them." And I never got to see like these amazing paintings that were produced for this like happening, where because they did indeed like they went to the Cut Theatre in London, and they tried to have these like 4-day happenings, at which point like where the audience became the film and the audience became part of the band, and they would and all this footage that they filmed was going to make it into the Lifehouse concert movie. And
it sounds like people got a lot of joy out of the idea of making this, even if it never got anywhere. Also, how was your? So it sounds like you interacted with Pete Townsend directly.
I did, yeah. I guess like I'm telling all this out of order. Like I was I was at like Eel Pie Records, and they put me in a room with a photocopier and a massive box of scripts, and they said, yeah, just like photocopy whatever you think is relevant. And I was like, well, all of this is relevant. Like I can't like just pick like, you know, whatever I can get photocopied in the hour that I'm here. So eventually they just sent me like this huge cardboard box just full of all this stuff, and it was kind of amazing. Like it was all kind of stuff that he'd had his assistants like photocopy and print out and stuff like that. So it was kind of you know, it's not like they were sending me like kind of priceless kind of rock and roll relics, but it was it was a massive amount of material. Yeah. So yeah, I met Pete at like this kind of gentleman's club. Not a gentleman's club. What's the word? A members club. Like it's like this very kind of swanky kind of members club in like Kensington, and there was like pictures of like the royal family on the wall and stuff like that. It's like as they were kind of people, the type of people who frequent this place, and it was like very not rock and roll. You know, it was like very kind of just aspirationally upper class. Like I guess all those like rock stars, they, you know, when they get rich, they buy their mansions and their Rolls Royces, and they just kind of live a little bit like aristocracy, you know. And that's the type of place that I met him in. Yeah. And
I mean, I would expect that. It'd be weird if he was like, you met him on a beanbag chair in the back of his van, you know?
It's true, yeah. Yeah, you're right. I mean, you might as well. I mean, do you remember Paul Pope saying after a certain point you don't get to meet Mick Jagger? Do you remember that? Has he ever said that to you?
Yeah, he said it several times.
Yeah.
I mean, it's true. It's like, and also there's a thing that happens with fame. Like if you're famous for most of your life, you're not going to act like a normal person anymore. I mean, you know, you might act like a cool famous person.
Yeah.
But at the trip to the 7-Eleven, you're going to be like, oh, someone's talking to me again. I'm a famous person. So I don't fault anyone for hanging out next to pictures of the Queen if they're like, oh, I've met her. She's great.
Yeah. Yeah. So, yeah. So like, he was there, and like his manager was there, and then like the publisher of heavy metal was there, and I think like one thing that he did, which I really liked, was he kind of basically said like, you know, these are the money people, and we need these people to exist. We need these guys, but like we don't have to talk to them. So he kind of like just talked past them almost, and was like, you and I, we're the artists, we're the creatives, like and these guys don't matter so much. And they just had to kind of, he's like, and he sort of almost like tuned them out in the room. He's like, okay, these guys aren't here, we're going to be creating together. And that was really kind of, I don't know, it felt very kind of, I don't know, it's telling. This is what he's had to do his whole life, I suppose, like kind of be surrounded by these money people that he sort of like slightly resents but also needs, you know. And
sure, yeah.
Yeah, and so yeah, he was one thing, like the first thing I saw was like the guy just like talks, you know, like he's been in a rock and roll band, he's been successful since he was 19, and he's possibly on the autistic spectrum, and he just will talk and he had this entire like sci-fi world that he hasn't thought about in 40 years, just like in his mind. Like he just, like, I could ask him any question about it and he'd have an answer, you know. And
so, have a quick aside.
Yeah,
I was just thinking, I've had experience in my life several times where I've met people. Everybody knows someone who's very self-important, and acts like everything, like they'll sit around and pontificate. Like imagine the books written about me, you know. Like everyone knows a pretentious college student and everything, but it's such a unique thing to meet someone who has changed society. Yeah. And also, I'm wondering if you had a feeling of, did he have a feeling of personal grandeur about him, or was he matter of fact about it?
He was matter of fact, but like he did kind of he did say stuff like, yeah, like I predicted all of this, like I predicted the modern era, essentially. I predicted virtual reality, and I predicted how, and then he was like, And then he was like giving other kind of grandiose predictions, like here's my current prediction as to what's going to happen to people in the future. So like he kind of saw himself as a.
You're not going to share that with us?
Yeah, I can if you want. Like he clearly kind of saw himself as a sort of visionary and a Cassandra, if you will. You know, like a prophet. And he said like, yeah, I think the next thing is microchips in children. Like there's going to be like chips in your brain, and it's going to be like exactly getting pets chipped, and it'll say like, well, if you don't get your kid chipped, then they're not going to have like all the advantages in life, and like the family down the road have got their kids chipped, so why haven't you got it? And he said that's
not wrong.
What's that? Yeah,
he's not wrong.
No.
Yeah. I mean, good work, Pete Townsend. You and he gets to check out probably before any of this, before we go into our full Skynet scenario.
Yeah.
Right,
Yeah.
and I think the general idea of the thing itself is an opposition of programmed music and generic, repetitive music versus rock and roll, and versus like freedom, and versus those are still themes I think that are resonant now.
Yeah.
Maybe even more so then. That certainly was not a danger at the time. I mean, Herman's Hermits, compared to any modern recording, sounds like friggin' the Frug, the Fug or something. You know what I mean? It's not
the Fug.
I'm conflating multiple bands simultaneously. The Fugs, the Shags. Well,
Yeah.
let's say the Shags.
The Shag.
You know what I mean? Like
yeah. My Little Sports Car. Those guys, like the
Exactly,
yeah.
Compare,
Yeah.
you know what I mean? Like he would have looked down on them as being inauthentic or produced or whatever, but comparatively to a modern, slick, quantized, multi-tracked MIDI monstrosity. I mean, Herman's Hermits are expressive folk musicians traveling from town to town.
Yeah,
Sure.
that's like a major theme of the book or of the Lifehouse story is everybody lives within the grid. They live in these big experience suits, which like show them kind of a compressed lifetime's worth of television programming or VR programming through within a night. So every night they live another lifetime almost, and so the reason the Lifehouse appeals to Mary is because it's a promise of a real experience, that she has to break free from the grid, travel across the ruined Britain, like post-apocalyptic ruined Britain, to find this real experience. And so Pete was like trying to explain to his bandmates about these experience suits. It's like, yeah, it's like a throne and you can like sit in it and have any experience you like. So he's trying to explain like virtual reality and these experience thrones to his bandmates, right? And like Roger Daltrey like used to be like a sheet metal welder and stuff. Like they were just like kind of simple lads, And so like he's like, yeah, you sit in it, you have any experience you want, and Roger's like, oh, so you mean like you put a penny in the slot and it wanks you off? You mean like that? And it's like no, lads, it's more like comprehensive and wide ranging than that. It's deeper than that. And Keith Moon is like, oh, I get it. So you put a penny in the slot and it wanks you off and puts a Mars bar up your ass. And so like that was like their kind of 1971 sort of understanding of this concept, So Brandon, yeah, go ahead.
Well, and they were
What's that? What do you say?
I said they were apparently visionaries as well.
Yeah.
Because what happens as soon as we have the internet?
It's true. Yeah, they weren't far off what such technology would be used for. Yeah, it's true.
What's the internet if not a penny in trade for a Mars bar up your ass?
It is. It's the world's biggest machine, like just conveyor belting Mars bars up the ass of everyone in the world, really, when you think about it. Yeah.
I'm trying to get a sense of like your going into this, because also like my understanding is this thing came into fruition kind of without the grandeur that you had hoped. I know we'll get to all of that.
Yeah, like so yeah, like I was I'm trying to it's because I've been working for Heavy Metal magazine. Like I'd got some stuff published in like it was when Grant Morrison was the editor. It was that era, And so
so much kind of like the Lifehouse in the sense of, or at least in the sense of, so much hope and then petering out.
It's fitting for a project like this that I was kind of brought on board and promised, like they told me like shoot for the moon, like you need to just like swing for the fences. This is like we want you to win an Eisner for this. This is gonna like set you up for life, and you're gonna like earn like hundreds of thousands of dollars from this, like from royalties. Like it's gonna be huge. Just like do the best job you possibly can, and so I did, and then it was like, yeah, you're taking too long on this. Like we're gonna replace you with a different creative team. It's like, I mean, you said swing for the fences, Yeah, go on.
Yeah, it's difficult too because I feel like that a lot of those themes. I mean, that's on a smaller scale. That seems to be a repetition in your career of people saying like, "Please do your hardest work. Time is not an issue. Money's not an issue." And then they're like, "Time and money are the issues here." Yeah. And I think that on another level, that's almost what being a cartoonist is like on some levels because it is this anything is possible. And then you're dealing with people that are like, 3 things are possible,
Exactly. Yeah, precisely. No, I've done it a few times. Like this is not my first project where I've been like, this is going to be a masterpiece, and I try, and then I'm like, oh no, like this is taking way too long. And so I have done other things where I was the factor. Like I said, okay, I don't think this is. I think I promised people way too much on this, and I don't think I can deliver. And so I have like graphic novels I did years ago where I'm like, this isn't as good as I thought it was going to be, so I can just kind of sit on this and that's fine. Like I think people do that all the time. It's just kind of
sure.
You put a book in the trunk and you save it for a rainy day. Like that can happen. This is kind of a different one because I really believed that this was coming out, and I was getting paid fairly well for it, and and then it just kind of got sort of taken away and finished off by a different creative team, and they really tried their best, like given the circumstances, like they had a Herculean task, like they had to get the whole thing finished in like 3 months.
I think the irony of this story is also that they took longer to get it out than you would have by yourself.
Yeah, that really is. Yeah, I got told like, listen, we need this by 2021, and the way you're going, like it's not going to be finished until we need it by 2020, and you're not going to be finished till 2021. And then they didn't get it finished until 2024. But like the pandemic hit in between that, so like the whole thing just kind of ground to a halt. So if they just kind of let me work through the pandemic, I would have got it done. It's kind of one of the big ironies about it. Yeah,
it's frustrating.
Yeah, I know.
All right, so now you have problems and solutions on your thing, which sounds like this should have been the name of this entire thing.
Yeah, like So the problem is like the 1971 draft is the good draft essentially, even though it's like the writing is far worse than the 75 draft. Like so I think so. The big problem is Mary is the main character, and I asked Pete Townsend like apparently in the 70s like people couldn't like get their head around what Pete was pitching. Like it's the main character, just like this kind of rock and roll roadie, technical musician. Like is it the Bobby character? And Pete would say, yeah, it's the Bobby character, but like looking at it, like Bobby is clearly like the Gandalf of this story. Like and it's Mary who's the Frodo. And when I put that to Pete, he was like, "Oh yeah, absolutely. Like Mary's the main character."
Right, narrative thing to bring the reader into it, and not just be introduced to someone who's like, "I have all the answers."
Yeah, precisely. So Mary is truly the main character. Now we've established Mary's the main character, that we get a problem, which is that Mary is really just a passenger in her own story. She kind of goes to the Lifehouse, she meets Bobby, and Bobby's wonderful, and Bobby kind of makes everyone see God and saves the universe, and Mary's just kind of a bystander. So I was like, well, the way we do this is Mary has a musical gift. Like I drew upon like Pete Townsend's own kind of autobiographical tellings of how he realized he had a musical gift. He'd be like when he was crossing the River Thames, like on a ferry, and like the burbling of the water and the noise of the engine sounded like music to him. Like he could hear it harmonically resonating, and he was like so overwhelmed by like the pure music that he was hearing, that he couldn't do anything. He just kind of fell into a kind of catatonic state. And so
Okay.
I sort of like, I was like, that must be what it's like to have a musical gift. I wouldn't know. But I decided, well, if we have that happen to Mary on her way to the Lifehouse, then when she meets Bobby, he's like, yeah, you have a gift and I can help you shape that gift. I can mentor you essentially. And so
Right.
Bobby
He's a
becomes,
music.
yeah, he becomes a mentor to Mary. And so then, spoiler alert, like if we have Bobby just die from the when the kind of fascistic people who want to stop the Lifehouse from happening, when they can kill Bobby, and meaning Mary has to finish his work. Mary kind of has to take up the mantle of the hero, and this is very kind of very standard hero's journey sort of stuff. It's very Joseph Campbell, and it's like it's fucking Obi-Wan Kenobi dying and Luke having to finish the mission. You know, it's that kind of thing, but it's what the story needed. It's what the story.
Yeah, and that's engaging, and it does speak to the larger thing of like people growing up and having to take roles that they were led by to the position.
Absolutely. Yeah. So now I'm going to show you something.
Yeah, no, I want to see. Because my impression is how deep this got. Because you had this kind of this thing, this
Yeah.
story wheel.
Check this out. So this is the hero's journey as kind of laid out by Joseph Campbell. We start at the top
Right.
there. We start in the ordinary world. We pass through into chaos as we go around the wheel. We cross the threshold.
Sure.
We have the meeting with the goddess, the magic flight. If you've like done any kind of screenwriting, you've seen all of this. And then as you zoom out, this is Dan Harmon's like famous kind of crystallation and distillation of this. He distilled it basically
Dan
to.
Harmon, the Rick and Morty guy.
Yeah, Dan Harmon is like famous in like screenwriting circles. He's actually famous for like being the person who crystallized that format into something very simple: the you, need, go, search, find, take, return. He that's like, and he says every story is this. Like even if it's whether it's like a story about saving the world or if it's a story about like going to the bathroom, it's you need something, you go, you find what you needed, you take it, and you return to where you started having changed. And he says like the reason humans think this way is because we are hunter-gatherer. We're a hunter-gatherer species. Like
Sure.
if
It's interesting. I'm wondering, does this stuff help you write? Because I find this stuff to be like the antithesis. Like I knew a guy who created a thing that was a comic grid that he could lay
Yeah.
over. It was like a golden ratio that you could lay over any page, and it would like he was like, this will tell you if your layout is right. And for me, it just was like you're turning the magic trick around, and you're showing it a little bit too much. You're not. So I'm wondering, does this help you process, or does it make it difficult?
I don't always use this. I think like it's basically it's the training wheels, and eventually you learn to kind of go without the training wheels. And if you look at like, there's many great storytellers who don't structure their things like this at all, you know. But the reason I used it here is because I had this massive wealth of material that I had to shape into something coherent.
Sure. And did you feel an obligation to make this actually what it was before, to kind of capture all of the hope that people had put into this?
Absolutely, yeah. Like, and for whatever reason, like call it hubris, but I felt like, yeah, I'm the perfect person for the job. I can definitely do this, you know. like, so I think like the way I'm trying to, yeah, okay. So this is color coded. That's what it was.
Yeah.
So the red is the character of Jumbo 7. The green is the characters of Ray and Sally, and purple is Bobby. And I think
Okay, so Jumbo 7 is the woman villain.
Yeah, Jumbo 7 is like she's kind of a Margaret Thatcher-esque kind of demagogue, like she's the ruler of this post-apocalyptic Britain, and then Brick,
Okay, I like the
yeah,
name.
Jumbo 7, yeah.
When you talk about Jumbo and Brick, I imagine them like rainbow bright Care Bears villains. They're just like cartoon elephants.
Yeah, well, it's very 1970s to have that kind of pop art attitude to naming things. Like, do you ever watch The Thief and the Cobbler? Have you seen that?
Yeah. Or even like Submarine, I guess.
Yeah, right, exactly, with the blue meanies. And Thief and the Cobbler has like Princess Yum Yum and Zigzag and all that kind of thing. So yeah, Jumbo and Brick are just like, they're very. It's like this is an era when you could buy popcorn called like Screaming Yellow Zonkers, and
Oh,
and
sure.
and there was like Eric Siegel's book was just called Love Story. Like there was just like a kind of pop art simplicity to how things were named. I actually like I put a little reference to Jumbo 7 in here, like in this book I made recently. Like
Oh, UK in a bad way.
yeah, Week in a Bad Way. The character Jin has a patch that says Jumbo 7. It's the
Oh, nice.
it's the symbol of, yeah. So the reason for that is she's
Actually, I read UK in a Bad Way parts 1 and 2 this morning.
Oh yeah, let's get a plug in
Yeah, it
there.
holds up.
Yeah, holds up. Thank you.
Yeah, no, it's really fantastic. Because that's your next book that people will see.
Yeah.
Should mention, and it's really fascinating piece of cartooning because it kind of exists in all of these. You do a lot of really interesting stuff in it, and I think for people that may not know your work as well,
Yeah.
I do think that you're like kind of capturing a lot of things about cartooning that haven't been gelled into one style quite the way you do it. And that's really
Interesting.
cool. There's so much taking what Otomo did and what like I see it as taking what Otomo did and taking like the weirdness of British comics and kind of putting those together in this kind of new way.
Yeah, yeah. It's
Really like Hewlett.
yeah. Well, I studied to be an animator. Like what I really like when I was like 21. Like what I wanted to do more than anything was just be like a character animator for like a company like Disney or Pixar. And like I learned so much about like character acting and stuff like that. And
Sure.
this story is I wanted it to be like a pure acting performance. Like it's so much of it is told through like physicality and the way the characters move and the way they kind of hold themselves. You know, like that was kind of the kind of challenge I set myself as a cartoonist in that one. So yeah. Oh yeah, that's right. She's called Jumbo 7 because she's the seventh Jumbo. Like it's every time it's basically just like this a royal family essentially of like just this Thatcher-esque like fascist demagogue seized power, and then when she dies, her daughter takes over, and it's been that way for seven generations. Yeah, so
right, that's cool. They're kind of like so Jumbo. It's a family name. It's not like Caesar.
No, yeah, it's a family name. Her name is just Jumbo, and so we have like concept art of all the Jumbos at some. If I can show you that at some point, but yeah, so you can see here like these dots around the edge are the pages, so that I could like know exactly what was happening on every single page, and all of these scenes are from the various drafts of Pete's scripts, right?
Trying to get it. And the whole hope was 150. It's a lot to fit in 150 pages.
It's crazy, yeah. Like, but I did it. Like, I managed it. Like page for page, I knew exactly what was going to happen at every single point. And
so, do you have some of the drawings you did for this stuff?
Yeah, let's get into it. So this is the very first page. Okay, so I'm gonna start you out. Start out kind of on a. So this is something that Pete wrote. This is a piece of poetry that Pete wrote for the project called One Note. So we go one note, and what I'm showing people is that music will be represented with light, essentially. So one note sounds like a light ray. One note sounds like a new day. We're seeing this note curve around into a circle.
I like your little color wavering to kind of show music on there.
Yeah, thank you. It's a really subtle effect. And then I never got to... So now we get into the realms of the unfinished. Like, I never actually got to colour this. This is pencils by me and inked by Cristina Coyantes, who helped out somewhat on this project. So one note is 2 in an echo, and 2 notes have a million reflections. So we're just cementing the idea that music is going to be represented visually in this story. So a million.
Okay, so are you doing pencils of this and then sending it to someone else, and she's like basically digitizing this? And
so like the halftone patterns in the background are made from my pencils, if you can see that, and then the hard white lines are Christina's inks. So
it looks digital.
Yeah, so a million is all the rest, the sound of a dream, a poem, and a scream. And what you notice now is that the light ray has become a kind of metronome. So one note is best. So what we now have is this idea that like time and rhythm are going to be represented through these panels. Like I'm just trying to get people on board who've never read a comic book before. Maybe this is like their first comic book in like 30 years that they've read, you know?
Yeah, and there's a nice way of kind of hand-holding them into new ideas that are like, but it's light and sound, so it's ideas we understand.
Exactly. So, and then that tick-tock metronome of the light ray now becomes like the swish of the windscreen wipers here.
Right. Okay.
And so we see the mobile home. And the mobile home is a big thematic like constant in the Lifehouse project. Like Pete Townsend has that song Going Mobile, and he wrote the whole thing in a mobile home, which I found out was called Maxine. I actually read Pete's like column in Sight and Sound magazine that was in, or it might have been in the New Musical Express, like in the 1970s. And he lived in this mobile home called Maxine, so that's what I named this thing. So yeah, this is where we get introduced to Ray and Sally, right?
Parents of the main character.
Yeah, although then, well, in the 1999 version, they're the parents of the main character. But in every prior draft, they were never Mary's parents. They were just like some kind of hippies, I suppose, who lived off the grid. They lived in their mobile home. And so let's see. How much do I want to get into this? You can see like I tried stuff out. Like I was designing these characters in the page. You can see like I gave him like specs and then I kind of got rid of them. You can see like I did a few different versions. Yeah. I gave him Lennon specs and then I gave him kind of square ones. And this is like this is what Britain looks like at this point. Like every window is broken, every tree is dead, and there's all these wires coming out of every building, right? And these are the wires that hold the experience grid. They didn't so like there was no kind of sense of digging up the road to put the fiber optic cables underneath. It's just like these huge wires have just been stuck in everyone's house. Funnily enough, when Pete Townsend was like describing this thing to Roger Daltrey in the 70s, he's like, Pete, like it'll never work. Well, where are we going to get all this wire from? That was his kind of problem with the whole concept. So
I like seeing your roughs and you doing very loose perspective grids as you work, because you're not overdoing it. You're kind of doing what you need to do. It looks like
exactly, because I didn't like fully construct everything. Like I think Dave Gibbons is like a guy who like fully constructs every panel. Like everything is just like perfectly. This is a color guide, but I just like I've never been that like technically brilliant. You know, like. I just kind of do what I need to get through it and make it look just about right, you know. This is a color guide I put together. So I wrote that that these scenes are going to be drenched in rain, and Maxine the motorhome is a comforting maternal presence. The interior is warm tones, which contrast with like the cold world outside. Like I pictured this looking like kind of you ever read like the work of Raymond Briggs, like Fungus the Bogeyman and stuff like that?
I'm not familiar.
Oh no, it's like he's one of the great British comic artists. Like there's Posey Simmons and there's Raymond Briggs, and they kind of like, you know, most British comic artists don't write and draw their own material. Most of the kind of great ones that everyone knows, like but Raymond Briggs does, and he has this incredible eye for drawing like sunrise and just like the way like the sky in Britain like looks when the sun is just about to come up, like these kind of pre-dawn kind of views, you know. I wanted to capture that in here, and this is just like a kind of MS Paint scribble for the colorist to
I like that even in the very simple thing you're still doing the way that the lights of the truck hit the rain.
Yeah,
a cool effect.
Because I think that's important, you know, like that's like that's that kind of thing is everything. That's where that's where the sort of cinema of it kind of lies, you know. Go on, Brennan.
It might be too general, but something that I'm interested in kind of discussing with you is I have this very probably simplistic idea of what British comics are as a style. Like in my mind, it's like excuse me. Japanese comics are very slow paced. You'll have a punch that takes 20 pages, and American comics are like, kind of, at least from my point of view, American comics are kind of medium paced, and then British comics are quickly paced, where you have a 2000 AD comic where everything is like very densed up, and they're telling an entire, what would be an American 30-page to Japanese 120-page story in 10 pages.
Yeah, no, you're right. Like, and I always kind of saw myself as being more in the kind of Japanese mold, but like as I kind of tried to make comics, I realized like, wow, I can't make pages that fast. Like I can't like have. Remember like my early things, I would write like, okay, I want 30 pages where the main character is just kind of walking around town and nothing happens, and like I was like, then I realized, well, that's going to take me like so long to do that, and I just kind of need to cut to the chase really and try and tell stories in a small amount of space because I'm not like that good at getting a lot of pages done. That's like I mean, which may be the reason that this project was kind of shit canned.
But you're putting so much work into them that it is kind of like, I think there's a payoff. Excuse me.
Yeah.
There's a payoff for that amount of work, and there's an interesting thing, because I do think it's my girlfriend's been studying the difference between Korean manhwa and Japanese manga.
Oh, really?
And my very cynical idea is the average like manga artist has gotten really good at being fast, but faking to the reader that they're not fast, because it's all being done really quickly. But if you have a studio of 8 guys all working on it and doing all the windows in the building, then it can feel like it took a lot of one person a lot of time, even though the scripts are often like, for a lot of weekly comics are very simple.
Yeah.
And my impression with a lot of Korean comics I've seen is they haven't quite figured out how to falsify to the reader that time was put into it, so it all feels a little like janky to me.
Interesting. Yeah, I think I do, because comic books, they're not quite as big in Korea, are they? Like they don't like certainly like in.
I think the web comics are getting really big over there.
Yeah, I think they do like their web comics. Like, but in Japan, you can go into any convenience store and you'll just find like piles and piles of comics, and you go in the next week and they've all changed, and it's like a completely different. Like it's so crazy how much comic books there are over there. And in Korea, like, you might, if you're lucky, find like one comic book in a convenience store, and it'll still be there next week, and it'll still be the same one. It's
But in contrast to America and England, where comics are talked about more, than it's like we're like folk musicians over here.
It's true. Yeah, that's I think you can see kind of like a Japanese influence in my work, in pages like this, where it's like just kind of these still moments.
Certainly. Yeah. No, and specifically, I feel like a lot of Otomo, which is interesting because kind of going back to one of the big things that got a lot of attention from you maybe a decade ago is you did the Bart Kira project.
Yes.
Which is taking, people don't know, it's basically, James had this insane idea of taking Akira and redrawing it with Matt Groening's Simpsons characters. And you went pretty far with it, right?
Yeah, based on an idea by Ryan Humphreys, who's this fine artist. It was like his idea, and then I was like, "Can I do this as a group project?" And he said, "Yeah, go ahead." And we didn't just get pretty far with it. We did the entirety of Akira within 2 years. Like we remade the whole thing. And
I didn't know what that was, because I know there was a book, Floating World. I think Floating World Comics in Portland published a book.
Floating World book out, yeah, and but like I got like all these offers to put out the entire thing as like a whole, like, it'd be this much on your shelf, like it's a massive project. Sure. And like I got like there was like some Russian guys like asking me if they could do it, and I was like, well we can't, and they're like, well, listen, it's all online anyway, so and you can't really stop us doing it, so. I think there might be like a Russian version just kind of floating around, but like but the whole thing never got like published in full. Yeah. We talked to Kodansha about it, and Kodansha were basically like, you can put this out, but you can't put the pages in sequence, basically. Like, because if you put out the pages in sequence, that's, stepping on our bottom line. You've made a competing project.
Did you learn a lot about Otomo making that project?
Yeah, I did. I became like, at one point I felt like I was kind of an expert. Like there's like,
sure.
there's like these Italian guys who kind of interview. They asked me, oh no, these Italian guys like sent me like this like academic paper they'd written about Domo, like Otomo sort of thing, and they like cited me in there as like the foremost Western scholar of Katsuhiro Otomo, which is like complete shit. Like I'm definitely not. Like I definitely don't know that much about him. I'm just like a big fan of his, you know. But like yeah, that was like the best thing about that project, just in terms of my personal journey as an artist, is just how much I got to engage with the work of Otomo and like how much I learned about him and his practice and his process and like his broader body of work, you know, like
Certainly,
yeah. So what were we
well,
talking?
but
Yeah,
I
go
think
on.
something really interesting about your Otomo influence is I feel like you've processed it and it's part of your style now, and you
Yeah,
do your kind of you're not like there's a lot of artists that basically wear other people's styles as a coat sometimes.
yeah, yeah,
And I think one of the things I find so fascinating about your work is I can see the influences there, but it's not like if you draw a building, I'm not going to be like, oh, that looks like a hacky Otomo building. It's like, it looks like a James Harvey building, but it looks like you digested Otomo and processed it out through all the other styles you're doing, which I think is
yeah.
the ideal way of doing other art.
That's what I want to do is process. Yeah, I just want to take the best possible lessons from the people I admire and put them all together. You know, there's like, how do you feel about all the mini Brandons that there are around? Like, there's all these people. There's people who just like do Brandon basically in their art style.
Yeah, I mean, I always like it. Well, because I always think when I met James Stokoe, he was kind of that,
Yeah,
and I don't think anyone would think of James Stokoe as that these days.
yeah,
So I think of it as like it's really cool that somebody likes your work to that, and oftentimes it'll be in a way that doesn't feel like they're taken from me that much. I've seen some pictures where I'm like, oh, that looks like something I would draw,
yeah,
or I've even seen pictures where I'm like, someone's doing something in my style and I don't like it. Like I don't like
yeah.
how they drew this,
It's kind of
which
like
is a funny thing.
it's like a Ghostface Killer Action Bronson sort of a thing.
Yeah, it's totally yeah, that's a bit of it. But I mean, I don't know. I've never been annoyed by it.
Yeah,
I think I get more frustrated when I see because I see my own work as a little janky sometimes. I don't think of myself as like the slickest artist in the world. So
right. So when people are
it's
kind of doing you, but they kind of like learn your bad habits as well as your good, as well as what makes you great.
well, I think it sticks out more when I see something like there's a lot of people who like Frank Quietly has some horrible Frank Quietly's out there.
Right.
There's some guys that don't know perspective that are
Hmm.
doing published comic books, putting on that guy's underpants, and
Yeah.
I feel like that is much worse. There's certain artists like I can't tell you. There's probably hundreds of working Mobius influenced people. Like I've certainly been accused of it
Hmm.
myself,
Yeah.
and but and maybe this is patting myself on the back too much, but like I can't. There's no Mobius guys that I think suck.
Yeah.
So maybe that's the idea. And there's Mobius guys like you take like Sylvain Dupree,
Yeah.
whose name I'm probably butchering, and I think he might be a technically better illustrator than Mobius,
Hmm.
just as far as like if you want a perspective drawing of a Roman cathedral,
And
like the Sylvain Dupree drawing might be like he might be more technically impressive than what Mobius would give you.
and
But
am
he's
I
kind of
getting them mixed up? That guy worked for Mobius for a while, didn't he?
yeah, they worked together in the Fifth Element,
Yeah, that's
and
right.
they were friends too. That's a big part of it too. Is he probably
Hmm.
understood the ethos really well? Because it's always fascinating. There's certain artists, like there's definitely Paul Pope guys where I'm like, I don't think this guy understands Paul Pope comics.
Mm-mm. Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
I know that Paul Pope isn't happy about at least one of those guys. Yeah.
yeah, I mean, there's kind of a cartoonishly worst version of that. So I feel just to kind of my own narcissism, I feel very blessed that
Hmm.
the people who seem to emulate my stuff, I seem to click with and I enjoy their work.
Well, that's
So
nice.
I'm
Yeah.
lucky
Yeah. Yeah.
because I think of like Paul Pope or Frank Quietly, who are both artists I really admire. They have some just like dog shit clones of them out there, and I feel like that's like, and it's probably because their popularity is so much more. But then the Mobius thing is weird because I don't know any shitty Mobius kids.
Yeah, it's true actually. Every Brandon kid I've ever met has been like very cool. Like they're always like people with very good taste, and like and you know that it's just like a stepping stone for them. Like right now they draw like you, but they're gonna figure out they're going to figure themselves out and find their own style at some point.
I think that's part of it too, and that's why that's kind of the James Stokoe thing is like, it's like I might, because a lot of artists like Mobius, for me, it's like you look at his work, and if you pick up a couple of his things, you're like, oh, this helps me figure out things, and then you can move past it and go into your own thing. And that's always the goal, is like, because I mean, that's always the goal, is to kind of eat something and keep moving on and find other things and everything, because you're not going to live the same life as another artist. So why would you want to draw a tree exactly like them?
I sometimes when I've been like doing bigger projects, and including actually Lifehouse, like I've taken on an assistant and said, okay, like, you can kind of roughly draw the way I draw, so maybe you can like do some backgrounds or like do some pages that I'll finish them off, but you can start the pencils on this page. And so what I see when they do that is like, I see like all my own mistakes just kind of like writ large and echoed. Like I remember there was this one where they draw like these crazy kind of like eyes, and I was like, what are these eyes like? And they're like, no, you do that like that, like the eyes were just kind of like strange, kind of almost like a 1930s stereotype of a Chinaman sort of eyes, and then like this assistant kind of like pointed out like 7 different places where I'd just like done that in my own work, and I was like, oh shit, And
I am a racist.
Yeah, I guess so. Not a racist, but like So I realized what I was doing. It's because I worked at the Charmin. I worked at the Beryl Productions, where they animate like the Charmin toilet paper bears, like in the.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, and she always draws like these big kind of like loopy oval eyes, and I found like everybody who's ever worked there just like carries on doing those eyes like their entire career. And so I keep accidentally like lapsing into Charmin toilet bear eyes. Like,
interesting, because I also think oftentimes you're like, it's interesting because your book UK in the Bad Way we were talking about, you started off with you, like you draw your face in profile, and then you go into you're immediately killed by a bus.
That's right. Yeah.
But it really does set a tone, especially knowing you, being like, oh, there's a lot of you in your art as well.
Yeah. It's there's many ways you could read that. Like like you see me and you think, oh, is this going to be autobiographical? Am I going to be the main character? And then immediately I'm killed and replaced by this other character. And yeah, I mean, I guess I'll leave it for other people to kind of like analyze that story. Like I don't want to kind of hand people.
I will say a slight note is I feel like the actual character who's you on the story is the street magician character.
Oh really? No, he's not me. Like I knew people were going to think that. He's like, the character of Edward. He's like, my sister is never going to watch this, so I basically tell you he's like a smooshing together of about 3 of my sister's different sociopathic boyfriends, right? She just like keeps like hooking up with these like fucking sociopath, weird, lying drug dealer boyfriends, and we're all just like,
because he's objectively a good person who is likable and charming.
Well, therein lies the rub. I mean, do we know that? Like, how did the coat that Jin gave him end up in the hands of that woman? Like, how did the money she gave him end up in the hands of that organization? Like, there's so many questions. If you start pulling at that sweater, you will question exactly who Edward is.
But I mean, even worst case scenarios, he's a and most people haven't read the book, so it's an interesting thing. But worst case scenario, I feel like because he's on the streets and he's very socially aggressive. We'll say, like he's doing magic tricks and these fantastical stories and everything. But I feel like he does an exchange. Like he's not vampiring from Jen at all. She gives him her coat and he gives her a skateboard in trade. And I feel like it's a very reciprocal friendship. And so even if something happened where he had to get rid of the coat and get rid of the money she gave him, it feels like he wasn't like trying to scam her ever. It feels like he did.
Yeah.
He gave her back stuff, so maybe it's moved past that.
Yeah, I mean, I'm glad that's your read on it. Like, I think other interpretations are kind of valid and encouraged by a close reading of the text, but I won't I don't want to give away the keys to the kingdom on that one, before people have had a chance to read it. But I'm glad.
Okay, I mean, I like correcting you on your story. You're like, no, James, you're wrong about this character.
but here's the thing: I'm really glad that you liked him, that you found him charming and charismatic, because that's the point. Like, he's meant to be a charming and charismatic character, and it's also, by the way, very nice that you thought that was me, because because he's not actually meant to be me. But yeah, he is. We'll say, like, he is on the face of it superficially a very charming and charismatic character, but like the text invites a closer reading is all I'll say. And
okay, he is a little bit. Are there elements of him? Who's the famous British podcaster, kind of rock star podcaster guy?
Oh, Russell Brand.
Yeah, he's got a little Russell Brand in him.
They did occur to me, and I always thought, like, if this ever gets like made into a movie, like this is before Russell Brand got outed as a bad man, but like they would yeah, like yeah, for like the obvious choice for like who would play that character, I'm sure someone would say Russell Brand, but like I already kind of had rehearsed the moment I say no to Russell Brand playing that character.
I think he's aged out.
He's aged out. He has, yeah. He's not the age of that character anymore, I don't think. Well, maybe I could see Edward as an older man. I could see him in his 50s. Like I
okay.
It's but yeah. Anyway, we might have to cut all this out because this is.
I know we're getting sidetracked on a book that people haven't read yet, but I think that yeah, but this will live for years on YouTube, and people can go back and investigate it after they've read UK in a Bad Way, which I think is a book that will. And my hope is, it felt like me and you have talked about you really like Daniel Clow's work, and I've never been able to connect with it, but I felt like I was able to. I felt like you're doing a bit of like a Daniel Clow's I can connect with your work sometimes.
I wonder if I can show. I might as well just like as we're talking about it, I can show the readers this. It's in my 100% comics folder, and then you go to this, and then you go.
Oh yeah, I think that'd be worth because definitely the opening of issue 1 I think would be cool to bring up your drawing of yourself.
Yeah, let's bring that up. See if that comes down the pipe quick. There we go. There's the cover I made. This is like, because I have children now, I don't have time to do like really involved covers, so the cover is just like the main character on a white background. But yeah, there's.
It's a nice run. There you are.
There's me. It's me, folks. And yeah.
Yeah, and that is the most British bus anyone has ever drawn.
Yeah, it's like not what the bus looks like; it's how the bus feels. Like. It's what the bus feels like. It's like that's like a collage that I made, like that's
yeah, and it does give the feeling of like this. Yeah, I don't know if you've denied it or a lot, but I always bring out the Jamie Hewlett in your style, and that feels like a bit of a Hewlett via Yellow Submarine.
Interesting. I didn't think about Hewlett for that, but like yeah, like I think the Hewlett like influence is unescapable. Like he's extremely I'm sure he has been a huge influence on me because like we're both British men and we have the same initials. Like I have to kind of try to sort of like stake an identity slightly outside of him, but like regardless of that, like the Hewlett influence is, you can't really shake it. Like the way this character kind of like wears the mask as a kind of prop on her back is like very much like the way like a character from the Gorillaz might wear a mask. Like it's difficult to and as much as like I think I'm doing something original, I always kind of like look at things in retrospect and be like, oh, I'm kind of doing Hewlett here. But I guess Hewlett doesn't quite write stories this way, and Hewlett doesn't kind of stage scenes this way, so I sort of it doesn't matter.
Yeah, I definitely think there's room, and there's a lot of things like the backgrounds. I feel like it's definitely where the Otomo comes in.
Absolutely, yeah. But the trap I run into there is that's something that Action Bronson said. Like they said, hey, you're just doing Ghostface Killer, and he said, yeah, well, Ghostface Killer ain't writing songs like these, and and Ghostface Killer did not like that, So, you're running...
Yeah, I feel like that's not a worry of yours though. Like and here's the character we were talking about, the kind of street magician character.
Edward, yeah. I wanted to make sure that like every magic trick here, you can kind of see how it was done if you look carefully. So like you can see there's a cigarette and he makes it disappear, and then it comes back. So how did he? By the way, this like
Right, so you got to find his thumb there.
this facial expression in the middle where he's like, "Oh, I'm sorry, did I just blow your fucking mind?" So I'm very proud of that.
That is really good.
Yeah, so you can, if you look very carefully, you see here he licks his thumb, and then the cigarette is stuck to his thumb. So that's how that was done. Simple, simple, simple.
Nice. And then the other one, so he does another magic trick that's a ring of smoke, and then you see that he's blown out. He's got a bunch of matches in his mouth.
Yeah, the other one is very silly. Yeah, this is kind of far more kind of like cartoony. He's like, okay, smoke ring trick. Watch the air in front of you. So how do you do that? Like like that. And just like I just wanted to give myself an opportunity to draw something very cartoony and very kind of because this is like everything about this scene, like you could shoot it on the street with your like a couple of your mates and a camera. So I just wanted to do something that was like really hard to do in live action, just like a really kind of weird visual joke,
Yeah.
Yeah. Should we get back onto the Lifehouse?
Yeah, we can get to the light. So I guess since we touched on this, we should. There's also a lot of Paul Pope in your style, I think, too.
Thank you.
But that's your panel framing.
Yeah, Paul. I actually like came late to Paul Pope. Like I kind of knew Paul as like a guy to talk to before I knew his work in any kind of depth, Like, but I really.
It's fascinating because not everyone gets to talk to Mick Jagger.
That's right. So what else we got here? So yeah.
Oh, that's beautiful.
Yeah, this is 1977. So this is like kind of establishing how the world of the Lifehouse happened. We established that there's this totalitarian society that banned music. And by the way, this is Pete's invention, but it's also in every single kind of rock opera is like, and music is banned in the future. And that's like Queen's We Will Rock You has that conceit. And I'm sure there's a few others like, but We Will Rock You is like a very terrible musical written by Ben Elton about about a totalitarian future where music has been banned.
Right, but music is such a tool of like, it's such a universal artistic tool to rally people. So
yes,
it makes sense. The idea of pulling it away and trying to imagine that is. And definitely gives you the impression of a horrible future.
And it happens. Like that's the crazy thing. Like it's not unheard of. Like like music was banned in Iceland by the Danish, I think.
Oh wow.
Yeah. So it always has been a tool of societal control to ban music. And so this
I think the flute was banned in one of the ancient Rome or Greece or something. There was some point where someone had banned the flute because they thought it was too erotic or too engaging.
Yeah, even like certain chords get called like these are the devil's chords and they can't be played and stuff like that. Like so like the suppression of music has always been like a genuine factor in the establishment of totalitarian societies.